Two people save for retirement. The first pays in for 10 years and then stops completely. Never adds another dollar again. The second pays in for 30 years. 3 times as long, 3 times as much money. 40 years later, the one who put in a third of the money is ahead by more than $250,000. Same market, same return. The only thing that changed was when they started. One of them quit early and still won. I know how that sounds. So I am not going to ask you to take it on faith. Every number in this video was run before it was said, because here is what almost no one in finance will tell you plainly. The size of your return is not what decides whether you end up wealthy. The boring things, how long you hold, who controls the money, how you size the bet, how you survive the bad years, those decide it for you. They are not tips. They behave like laws. And once you can see them, you cannot unsee them. This is the best financial advice you will ever hear. Not because it is clever, because it is true. And I can show you that it is true. Start with the number you just saw because it hides something. The early saver did not win by putting in more. He put in less, $60,000 against $180,000. He won because his money was given more time to do the one thing money is good at: multiply itself. Here is the part that breaks people's intuition. Your mind runs in straight lines. You assume twice the time gives twice the money, and twice the money gives twice the result. Compounding does not work that way. It works in curves. For a long time, it does almost nothing. And then, very late, it does almost everything. All at once. We are wired to expect a staircase. Compounding builds a ski jump. Watch a single saver who never stops. $500 a month, 8% a year, 40 years. After the first 10 years, he has about $91,000. Modest. Forgettable. This is the stretch where most people quit because nothing seems to be happening. It feels like pushing a boulder that will not move. But look at the last 10 years, years 30 to 40. In that final decade alone, his balance grows by over $1 million. More than 10 times what the entire first decade produced. Same $500 a month. He did not start saving more. He did not find a better investment. The only new ingredient was time. The boulder he could barely move at the start is now rolling downhill on its own. That is the first law. Time compounds harder than money does, which is why the saver who started early and quit still beat the saver who started late and tried harder. He was not better. He was earlier. And here is a tool you can carry out of this video and use tonight. It is called the Rule of 72. Take the return you expect and divide 72 by it. The answer is roughly how many years it takes your money to double. At 8%, 72 divided by 8 is 9. Your money doubles about every 9 years, which means over a 40-year career, the same dollar doubles not once, not twice, but more than 4 times over. Start 10 years late, and you do not lose 10 years of saving. You lose an entire doubling at the end, the largest one, the one that would have mattered most. And it goes further than most people are comfortable with. A worse return, held longer, beats a better return, held briefly. $10,000 at 12% for 20 years grows to about $96,000. The same $10,000 at only 7%, but left alone for 40 years, grows to almost $150,000. The lower return wins. Not by a little, by half again as much. The investor chasing the higher number lost to the investor who simply refused to get out. So the first decision is not how do I find a bigger return. It is how do I stay invested long enough for the return I already have to matter. Time is the lever. Almost everything else is noise. Now, time can only compound something. So the question becomes, what are you actually feeding it? There are 2 kinds of money, and confusing them is one of the most expensive mistakes a person can make. The first is cash flow. The money that comes in and goes back out. Your salary. The rent check, if you are a landlord. It pays the bills, the car, the groceries. It keeps you alive this month. But it does not compound because you spend it. It is a river. It only flows while you keep working. Stop, and the river runs dry within weeks. The second is equity, ownership. The money you do not spend sitting in things you own, shares of a business, a stake in property. Equity is not a river. It is a reservoir, and it is the only one of the two that compounds because it is the only one you do not consume. The river keeps you alive. The reservoir is the only thing that ever sets you free. Here is why the distinction is not philosophy. It is arithmetic. Renting out your labor barely compounds. Over a working lifetime, $1 of wages grows at maybe 0.5% a year above inflation. $1 of ownership grows at around 7% above inflation. Over 40 years, that gap is not small. The dollar of labor becomes about $1.20. The dollar of ownership becomes almost 15. The same dollar on the ownership side of the table did roughly 12 times the work. Labor pays you once. Ownership pays you while you sleep. This is also why a raise is not the same thing as getting wealthier, and why so many people earn more every year and never feel any richer. A raise increases the river. If your spending rises to meet it, which is what almost always happens, the reservoir never fills. You can spend your entire career climbing from $30,000 a year to $300,000 a year and arrive at the end exactly as dependent on your next paycheck as you were at the start. More income that is fully consumed is just a bigger river. It is not wealth. Wealth is only the part you divert into the reservoir, which is why income and wealth are not the same thing, and why high earners go broke. Picture two people. One earns $200,000 a year and spends all of it. The other earns $80,000 but owns $1 million in equity. Ask how many years each could stop working tomorrow and still eat. The $200,000 earner, 0. Not 1 year. The moment the income stops, everything stops. The $80,000 owner drawing 4% a year can do it indefinitely. The lower earner is, in every way that matters, the wealthier of the two. That is the second law. Income keeps you alive. Equity makes you free. And the entire game is converting the first into the second before you run out of time, which is exactly where the first law comes back. The earlier you turn income into equity, the longer it compounds. How much equity is free? There is a clean rule of thumb. Take what you spend in a year and multiply by 25. That is roughly the reservoir you need for the 4% it throws off to cover you forever. Spend $60,000 a year and you need about $1.5 million in equity. Not income. Equity. And notice what that means. The less you need to live on, the smaller the reservoir has to be, and the sooner you are free. Cutting your spending does not just save money. It moves the finish line closer. You have seen this next one before, even if you did not know its name. It is the most popular piece of math in all of personal finance because it sounds like a magic trick. Buy a $300,000 house. Do not pay cash. Put 10% down. $30,000 of your money, the bank covers the rest. The house rises 10% to $330,000. You did not make 10%. Your $30,000 became $60,000. You made 100%. 10 times the return from the same price move. That is leverage, and every finance channel will stop the math right there. I am not going to stop there, because the lever does not know which way you want it to push. Run the exact same house the other direction. It falls 10% to $270,000. The loan does not shrink. You still owe the bank everything you borrowed. Your $30,000 of equity is now 0. A 10% dip in the house erased 100% of your money, and that is the polite version. Add the closing cost you paid to get in, 3% of the price, and the same 10% dip does not just wipe you out. It leaves you owing money on a house worth less than your loan, underwater on a house that barely moved. And there is a crueler version of this that catches people in the stock market, because there the lever can pull the rug out from under you before the bottom even arrives. Say you put in $50,000, borrow another $50,000 against it, and buy $100,000 of stock. 2 to 1. As long as it rises, you look brilliant. But the lender has a rule you agreed to and probably forgot. Your stake has to stay above a minimum. The stock does not even have to halve. It only has to fall about 29% and the lender issues a margin call. They do not ask. They sell your position at the worst possible moment to protect their loan. And they lock in your loss permanently, right at the bottom, exactly when patience would have saved you. The same drop a person who owned their shares outright could simply have waited out forces the leveraged person to sell and never recover. This is the whole truth about leverage. And it is the third law. It multiplies everything. Your gains, and in exactly the same proportion, your losses. It is not free money. It is borrowed amplification, and the amplifier runs both directions at once. Everything in leverage rests on one thing: the collateral. Borrow against a house, the house is the collateral. Borrow against stock, the stock is. Lose the collateral, and the loan does not forgive you. Used carefully against an asset you understand and can afford to hold through a bad year, leverage is the most powerful tool in finance. Used to reach for something you could not otherwise afford, it is the fastest way to turn a bad year into a permanent one. One quick word before the last two laws, the two that keep everything you have built from disappearing. If you have found this useful, the actual math, run honestly instead of the half that flatters you, that is the whole reason the Wealth Logicians community exists. Members get the vault, the same tools I use to run these numbers, so you can put your own figures in instead of mine, and see what these laws do to your situation specifically. The link is in the description. Now, the two laws that decide whether you stay in the game long enough for the first three to ever pay off. Most people think of a loss and a gain as opposites of equal size. They are not. They are not even close. Lose 10%, and you need to make about 11% to get back to even. Survivable. But the math curves against you. Fast. Lose 50%, and you do not need 50% to recover. You need 100. You have to double what is left just to return to where you started. Lose 80%, you need 400. Lose 90, you need 900. The whole does not grow with the loss. It grows much faster than the loss, and follow that curve all the way to its end, because that is where the whole reason for this law lives. Lose 99%, and you need a return of 9,900% just to break even. Lose 100%, and there is no return large enough. None. Infinity would not do it, because compounding has one fatal enemy, and it is the number 0. Every law we have covered so far is a chain of multiplication. Your money times a return times another return, year after year. Multiply that chain by 0 even one single time, and the whole thing collapses to nothing, and no future return can ever bring it back. The early savers' 40 years of compounding, the equity, the leverage used well, all of it is only worth something as long as it never once touches 0. This is why the size of a bet matters more than the quality of a bet. Let me show you something that surprises people. Suppose you find a genuinely excellent wager, an 85% chance to win, and when you win, you make 50%. Wonderful odds. Any casino in the world would trade places with you. Now put your entire stack on it, and when you win, roll all of it into the next one. Same great odds again and again. Play that 10 times, all in, and you survive only 20% of the time. An 85% bet wipes you out 4 times in 5. Not because the bet was bad, but because you sized it so that one loss takes everything. And over enough tries, that one loss is not unlucky. It is guaranteed. A 15% chance of disaster faced over and over stops being a risk and becomes a certainty. The gambler did not lose because he was wrong about the odds, he was right about the odds. He lost because he bet in a way that let a single bad outcome end the game. That is the fourth law. The goal is not to win big once. It is to never be forced out of the game. Bet small enough that no single loss can take you to 0, because the recovery math means the deep losses are the ones you never come back from. Protect the downside, and the upside will take care of itself. Survival is not the boring part of investing. Survival is the whole strategy. Which brings us to the last law, the one most likely to start an argument. You have heard that the wealthy do not diversify, that they bet big on what they know. Put all your eggs in one basket and watch the basket, and it is true. The people who build enormous fortunes are almost always concentrated in a single thing. But there is a condition attached to that advice, and it is always left off. They concentrate in the one thing where they have both deep understanding and real control, usually their own business. They are not guessing. They have the inside view and their hands on the wheel. Concentration is rational only when you have an edge, a real reason to believe you know something the rest of the market does not. Take away the understanding, take away the control, and the same move that built their fortune becomes something else entirely. It is no longer conviction, it is just gambling with extra steps. And here is what gambling with extra steps actually looks like, because the stock market hides it behind its averages. Pick a single stock at random and hold it for the long run. The typical one, the median, does not double, does not even keep up. It loses money. 2 out of every 3 individual stocks end up worth less than where they started. Only about 1 in 6 beats simply owning the whole market. The dartboard, in other words, mostly loses. So how does the market itself go up year after year if most of the stocks inside it are sinking? Because of a tiny handful of monsters. Around 4% of stocks produce the large majority of all the gains the entire market has ever made. A few enormous winners drag the whole average up and carry everyone who happened to be holding them. The index does not win by being clever, it wins by guaranteeing that it owns those 4% of winners because it owns everything. And before you tell yourself you will simply pick the winners, remember that they are only obvious now looking backward. In advance, the giant winners looked exactly like the failures sitting beside them. For everyone that became a household name, there were a dozen that looked just as promising and quietly went to zero. Hindsight makes it feel pickable. It was not. So put those two facts together. If you cannot identify that 4% in advance, and the evidence says almost no one can, not the professionals, not the funds that charge a fortune to try, then concentrating your money is, mathematically, most likely to land you on a loser. Owning everything is the only way to be certain you also hold the few winners that make the whole thing work. That is the 5th law, and it is the exact opposite of the slogan. Diversification is not weakness. It is a hedge against your own ignorance. And being honest about the limits of what you know is not timidity. It is the most sophisticated move on the board. This is the real, unglamorous case for a simple index fund. Not that it is exciting, but that it quietly guarantees you own the winners you could never have picked in advance. You concentrate where you genuinely have an edge. Everywhere else, you spread out, because the math says the humble move is the winning one. So put the 5 together, because they are not really 5 separate rules. They fall into 3 jobs, and together they are one system for keeping money instead of losing it. The first job is momentum, getting money to grow at all. That is the first 2 laws. Give it time and feed it equity instead of income. The second job is structure, deciding who actually captures that growth. That is the third law, leverage, which can put the growth in your pocket or hand it to the bank, depending entirely on which way the lever turns. And the third job is asymmetry, making sure you are still standing to collect. That is the last 2 laws. Never bet so big that a single loss ends you, and never concentrate in something you do not understand. Momentum builds it. Structure captures it. Asymmetry protects it. Miss any one of the 3, and the other 2 cannot save you. And it all collapses into 5 questions. Before you put $1 anywhere, ask them. 1. Can this compound? Is it built to grow over years, not days? 2. Who controls it, you or someone else? 3. What happens if it fails? Do you get something back or nothing? 4. Is the upside bigger than the downside? And can any single loss take you out? 5. Do you actually understand it? Can you explain how it makes money and what could go wrong? If you cannot answer those clearly, you do not have an investment. You have a hope. At the start, I told you this was the best financial advice you will ever hear, and that I would not ask you to believe it. I would show you. You have now seen the math. Not opinions, not slogans. The same numbers, run the same way, every time. Time beats return, Equity beats income. Leverage cuts both ways. Do not blow up. And diversify everywhere you do not have an edge. None of it is clever. All of it is true. That was always the point.